All right, Corey. It's your time to shine.
Go?
Yeah, go for it.
Maximum power! It's Flashback 64!
Nice. There, yeah, that sounded really good. Welcome everyone back to Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. I'm Goo, and I'm joined, as always, by McKenna.
Hello.
Hello. And this week, we are joined by our pals Corey Richmond.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hey, Corey. And Gambling Connor Corr.
Greetings.
It's good to have both of you guys. There's a few things we want to ask you before we actually get into the actual show, but I wanted to shout out, we got a ton of, on our first episode, we got a ton of nice reviews that we all posted about over on Twitter, and yeah, we got five-star reviews, and that, I think that helps you. That's supposed to help your podcast out. So I just want to say appreciate everyone for writing in, and if anyone else can do that again, that'd be awesome. It's supposed to help.
Thanks.
Allegedly. So we said this on our last episode, but with the show, we want to do, we want to talk a little bit of historical context, a little bit of nostalgia, but we also were talking about the idea of getting autobiographical and going back and, hitting those parts of our own lives and like what was going on at that time. So I wanted to ask you guys, maybe Connor, if you want to say first, like with the Nintendo 64, was that a console? Like, what's your experience with it? Did you grow up with that, or did you play that back in the day?
Yeah, that was actually my first video game console. I believe I got it when I was pretty young, like 5 years old or something like that. I had a lot of good times playing on that machine. That thing is a real tank, I gotta say. I must have dropped my big ass CRT on that thing like 5-6 times, but it just still keeps chugging. I mean, that's got to be one of the most durable consoles ever made. I feel like of all the older consoles I've had, like that's the one where it gives me the least trouble going back. Like I always think of like that. I sometimes got to do the blowing the cartridge thing, but like I way more associate that with like NES games, and just after a while, like really struggling to get some of them to work. You call it old reliable.
Old reliable, yeah. Corey, what about you? You big N64 gamer?
Big time. Yeah, the N64, folks, the N64 was it for me. That was the one where it was the point of no return, no turning back. I'm a full-fledged gamer. And it wasn't my first video game console, because I had played the original Game Boy, I had played Game Boy Color. My dad had a Sega Genesis that I had played a few games on, but like the N64 was like a cornerstone of my life in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like because I had an older brother who was 2 years old. I was born in 95, so like for some of these early games I would have been way too young to play them or whatever, but as I started to get older, my brother was already into it, and then we had a next door neighbor who was a little older than my brother, and he was into it. Or if I went to like a babysitter's house, they had an N64, and we would go to Blockbuster and rent games for the weekend. Or if I went to my friend's house, we would be playing N64. So it was everywhere in my childhood. And that was really the console where like I started forming, huge video game memories and stuff. And that's, since then, it's been just a full-blown spiral.
Right on. So I mean, yeah, I think we've all been kind of in the same age group where it hit us all in that a very similar age at our life, where like, yeah, for me it was like I was like 8, so I was like that I was perfectly built for this console.
You mind if I tell a quick story about the N64?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we had it like for forever, and it was at our house. And of course, as I started getting older, like middle school, high school years, like other consoles were coming out, and I was like, "Oh, the N64, that's old. I don't want to play that anymore." And we had family friends who had two boys that were quite a few years younger than me, and they started getting to the age where they could play video games. And the mom was like, "Oh, if Corey doesn't play the N64 anymore, do you guys mind if we take it and give it to our two boys?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't play that garbage anymore." And then
that's for babies, he said.
And then fast forward like a few years towards the end of my high school, and I just started thinking about it, and I was like, "Man, I want that back." So I went back over to their house, and I was like, "Hey, do they play that still? Because like I want it back now." So I took it back.
God, yeah, I've had that a lot where I like especially when I was younger, I didn't like I hit that same thing where it was like the one was old and I kind of moved on, and then I didn't like keep track of my stuff, or my parents like got rid of it or something like that, and I kind of regret that now as I'm like trying to reassemble some of my N64 collection. I know, Connor, you have like you have a pretty good collection of older games. Is it a lot of your...
Never, under any circumstances, relinquish my Nintendo 64 for my cold dead man. I have the same one that I've had for almost 25 years, so I'm getting buried with that thing.
I still have our OG one too. It's the same thing, because like I hit that age, and it's just like my brother would sell a bunch of video games, and you have no hindsight. You're like, I don't play this anymore. I'm not going to need it anymore. And then like fast forward to when I got more into gaming, even more and more, and I will not let anyone touch any of my games. I'm not giving any of them up.
I had like a weird like mix and match run of like N64 stuff as a kid, because I think it was like, because like my parents were divorced, and then I think, but so it was a thing where it was like my stepmom had an N64, my stepdad had an N64, I had an N64, and then like things start, especially because the adults aren't really like keeping track of things, like stuff's like bouncing around between all these things and
starts to mix together.
All of a sudden you have 2 copies of Mario Party 2 or whatever. It's like, how did this get here?
Wow. You could have one for every room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
But we can also talk about the time period, because I think we determined actually in the last episode that everyone was born in like 1995. Was that?
Yeah.
Yep.
That is the year. That is the year that I was born. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Same. Also the year I was born.
All the guests are 95.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, literally, yeah, and you. No, literally the only person who's not been born in 1995 was me. So I'm like,
old,
yeah, I'm so old. No, it's just like, I was like...
a good year. I remember it well.
I was just hoping like, well, no, it'll be good, but I want to get some oldies in who remember, like actually remember things in 1996 happening.
Some of the old heads.
Yeah, some of the old. I think Andy is our only.
Yeah.
Oh, and Moss.
Moss is gonna come. Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta.
We're both old curmudgeons.
My memories of the time are more like, hey, a dog, you know, or something. But let's talk about. So this week we are in November 4th, 1996. You guys want to know what was going on then?
Let's hear it.
Okay, so the Macarena Bayside Boys Mix by Los Del Rio. It's at its 14th and final week at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and it's its 46th week on the chart. This song is a freaking powerhouse.
What a dominant reign.
What a hit.
So similar to the last episode, we have a lot of returns in the top 5 here too. We've got I Love You, Always Forever, It's All Coming Back to Me Now, and Twisted. Those are still up there. But Connor, you and we watched the video, and McKenna, joining the top 5 songs of the week is No Diggity by Blackstreet.
Oh yeah.
Absolute jam.
Kind of a scary music video though.
I think it's awesome, but it is creepy a little bit. The puppet. Yeah.
No diggity to that music video.
Oh man, I love.
Too scary.
Top selling albums of the week were "Recovering the Satellites" by Counting Crows, followed by "Falling Into You" by Celine Dion, and "Life Is Peachy" by Corn. We're gonna see on this podcast actually is going to perfectly cover the reign of nu metal. I think we're seeing like the birth.
Secretly a nu metal podcast.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna slip some nu metal in for sure.
You'll get to flex your other expertise.
Exactly. Well, yeah, like I said, we're living in my heyday. This is like so yeah, we're gonna see the birth and death of nu metal, at least in popular culture, I would say.
Quote unquote death.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, I mean, Corn, they're still killing it. They're still.
Yeah, nu metal never died. You just stopped paying attention.
You know, I know. I apologize. I want to apologize to Fred and Jonathan and Chino. The highest grossing film of the weekend was Romeo and Juliet, Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, which we actually covered. We actually covered that movie over on the Virtual Theater podcast feed. So I want to promote that, but it's I don't know. I don't want to give it all away, but that's a pretty awesome movie.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers for Romeo and Juliet.
I hope it's a happily ever after and they get what they want.
Okay, not a game I'm like super familiar with, or a series, but the same week that these games we're talking about came out, also was released Blood Omen, the first game in the Legacy of Kain series. Has anybody played any of those games?
Nope.
No, but I'm familiar.
Okay. You're gonna get a lot of us we're Nintendo nerds more, so we're gonna miss out on some of these cool games. Also, November 5th, which is the next day, Bill Clinton wins re-election for President of the United States. Sorry, Bob Dole.
Attaboy, Bill.
As we talked about in the last one, we actually McKenna and I watched another Saturday Night Live from the time period, and all the jokes were just about how it was so obvious that Bob Dole was going to lose.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did say his first name a lot.
Yeah,
it was good marketing.
I don't run around saying Bob Dole does this and Bob Dole does that. That's not something Bob Dole does.
He like legit was doing it.
I don't remember a lot of presidential losers, but thanks to his branding, I will never forget Bob Dole.
Okay, this is another one where I can't talk about it every episode, but since Connor, you're a professional wrestler and part-time, yeah. So a part-time professional wrestler, and so this, I realized this podcast time period will also perfectly cover the Attitude Era of professional wrestling, and the birth and death of WCW pretty much lines up exactly with the length of N64.
Oh, nice. Convergent.
Yes, so I did want to point out at this time, because this is a notable time in wrestling. This is like right when the New World Order debuted in WCW, and that was obviously such a big moment in wrestling. And
historic.
Yeah, and this is when Sting's still up in the rafters. He's all brooding, you know, what's going on. And then over on Raw, we watch actually the Raw. The day we're talking about this on Raw was the episode where Stone Cold Steve Austin tries to invade the home of Brian Pillman, and Brian Pillman pulls a gun on him.
Ah, yes. Classic misstep, some would say.
Yeah.
But I think it's good. I think that's just some good soap opera in your wrestling there.
Yeah, I'm surprised guns, you know, like, I'm sure those would
Well, the problem is once they appear, there's not much else to do, because it's like once the gun comes out, you're not going to suplex the fella.
That's true.
But you know, in response to the Nintendo 64's lifespan lining up with this particular moment in wrestling, I think that also might be why we got some of the best wrestling games of all time, too.
Oh my god, and yeah, there's gonna be, what, like 4 episodes at least that are covering some of these games. Yeah, it was just a high point for wrestling, for new metal, and for me. Let's move on. Let's talk about the games we're here to talk about this week. McKenna, why don't you tell us about Mortal Kombat Trilogy?
Mortal Kombat Trilogy is a 2D fighting game famous for its finishing moves called fatalities, where defeated opponents are brutally murdered in a variety of gruesome moves unique to each character. Despite its name, the game is not a set of 3 games, but rather an update of Mortal Kombat 3 with characters and stages from the previous games added. It was the first third-party game released on the Nintendo 64. Play against your friends or in single player, where you fight in a series of battles to save Earthrealm.
Corey, I want to ask you first, because I think we're bringing you on more for the Wave Race segment. You don't have much familiar with Mortal Kombat. Do you have much familiarity with Mortal Kombat as a whole?
Like, somewhat, I do. More just kind of, I've been aware of it as like a pop cultural thing. Like, I generally know what it's about. I've played, like, in however many different settings. I know I have played at least one of the games at least once. But other than that, it's just kind of been something that's in the background that, like, oh yeah, I know what that is.
For sure. So, well, Connor, though, we brought you on. You're our expert for Mortal Kombat. You're a big fighting game player in general.
Sure.
Where does Mortal Kombat, like, for you? Is it one of your, like, favorites of the genre, or where do you gravitate towards more?
It's an interesting question. I have a bit of a complicated relationship with Mortal Kombat in that context, because it didn't really become a serious competitive game until much later, but I always enjoyed Mortal Kombat more on the casual side, and I've played them all going way back, probably since around Mortal Kombat Trilogy. So yeah, I mean, with this game in particular, it's interesting too, because this was a console exclusive, whereas at that time, a lot of the more competitive fighting game players would only stick to games that were in the arcades. So this one never became like a big tournament standard here, but in South America, specifically Brazil, where they didn't have as much of a thriving arcade scene, it became very much the competitive standard, and even to this day there's still a big scene for Mortal Kombat Trilogy in Brazil.
Okay, so is it like specifically that game is more popular there, or like where do you think it actually stacks up, like in the fighting game or like Mortal Kombat competitive scene as a whole?
Well, that's the thing, I kind of side with the arcade purists for the most part, and there's some. So it's interesting too, because even though the Nintendo 64 had a lot of cut content for their version of Mortal Kombat Trilogy compared to the PlayStation 1 version, like they changed a lot of. I mean, it's like an updated version of Mortal Kombat 3, but they changed a lot of sprites and also it's more, the aspect ratio is different, which changes how certain combos react and things like that. So despite that, though, the Nintendo 64 version is considered the main one that people stick to. And so it has some like unique properties, but I like it. I think it's a really fun game because you get to like try out, you get to see the Mortal Kombat 1 stages and all that.
Yeah.
So,
it's sort of like it's kind of like a greatest hits type game.
Yeah, definitely. I think these days, I mean, it's so far removed, but it's almost like kind of like you could see it having been DLC for Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 at the time, had that existed.
Oh yeah, that was so yeah, that's interesting, like the different versions and stuff, because we were reading McKenna and I were like reading Nintendo Powers, and they did do a feature on this game, which was cool. It like detailed some of the characters and some of their moves and combos and stuff. This is pretty neat. But like advertisements in Nintendo Power, they also had like an ad for arcade games, and one was like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And I don't know, it's just weird. Like I was confused trying to figure it out at first, but I guess
they would need to do like balance patches for characters, and like, you know, these days, like I mentioned, DLC, they just kind of can do that online. But back then, you'd release a whole arcade cabinet, and people would be like, oh, some character is too weak and some are too strong, or, you know, they'd want to add new characters and stuff, so they would just have to put out a whole new machine for places to order.
So McKenna, I think you're more aligned with Corey, right? You hadn't played any Mortal Kombat before this.
Right. Not familiar at all, really. I remember seeing like MK11 trending on Twitter, and and the first thought that popped into my head was Mario Kart 11, even though we're not there with Mario Kart.
What happened to the rest of them?
Someday.
I don't know. I just couldn't. I was like, oh, Mortal Kombat. The only game I've ever played that's really similar was Tekken. Hadn't even played any other fighting games in that style.
Okay, that's like the only other fighting game. Okay, yeah. I think for me, I'm kind of a mix, like similar to Corey, where like I had played it in settings of like knowing people, like our buddy Moss is a fan of the old games, and you know, just being around people who were like, oh, let's play some Mortal Kombat, but I had never like played enough on my own to ever like understand what to do, and like that it's always been in the setting where it's like, okay, let's do it, and it's like everyone who's already really into it, so I always was really bad and I always got beat, you know. It was like, I wouldn't say it's not fun, I just, you know, I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for it. And I'll actually say, Connor, when we played it together, and you were just like, you just told me a couple of things like, oh, hey, like the uppercut is a good move, and like the jump kick is good, and if, you know, like just a few tips, it wasn't enough where I was like, oh, I've mastered this, but where I was like, oh, I kind of understand how to do a few things. That was probably the most fun I've had playing Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, you were doing well. We were trading game. We were pretty even when we were playing. I thought McKenna was doing particularly well too. But you know, fighting games generally, that whole genre has that problem with like teaching people how to play the game. It's kind of an issue.
I always feel like I want to try, like, I'm like, maybe if I try the new ones, because I feel like even if, like, I don't even really care about like story in games that much, but they look like they have like fun story modes that if I just like played through and played along with, I'd probably just like get better at it, and it would be a little bit more fun than just like, you know, kind of not grinding, but you know what I mean, like trying to do the right combos and stuff, like just more a more natural way to get into it, I think.
The contemporary ones are a bit more accessible, and they do have a lot of good single player options. But you know, we're talking N64, and even those classic ones, I think, have that do have that problem where you know, some people know and they don't know. But with Mortal Kombat, a lot of that allure, that mystery is, you know, part of the fun. You see someone input a fireball, and it's like, whoa, how'd they do that? You gotta
yeah.
I feel like there are two ways to play. Like, I have played some fighting games like that where I don't know what that style is called, where it's like the side by side and it's combo based. I've played a few games like that, and I feel like there's two ways to play. One is you have no idea and you see if you can string together something really cool, and two is like, all right, give me 10 minutes to study the combo guide and let me recognize what this character can do.
Yeah, I do.
Button mashing can lead to good results sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true. I think McKenna and I were looking at a guide for one of the characters and trying to do one of the moves, but instead did another move. It's like, oh, okay, well, you can do this move now.
Yeah, that was when we were at the arcade.
Oh yes, so we did go actually to our local arcade and play a little bit of the arcade version too, which is cool. It I actually I wanted to say, even though I don't really know all the like technical details, like Connor, when you're saying you're like an arcade purist, just from like pretty much any arcade game, like going from playing the SNES or N64 version of a lot of those and then just seeing it in the arcade, it just looks so much better. So it just looks nicer to me, so I've always just assumed it's better.
I mean, this game got really bad reviews at the time. I like it, and I think people who like fighting games still like go back to it and enjoy it. But at the time, it got horrible reviews because it was not a very good. People were expecting like a one-for-one port of the arcade with this new generation of consoles. As you mentioned, this was the first third-party release.
High
And
expectations.
it was like very heavily compressed. The audio's really bad on it, and it just like was not really that much better than the Super Nintendo version, which came out not that long before. So
Oh yeah, that was the thing too. So they were advertising the Super Nintendo version. That really was like a just in. It's kind of a side note, but reading through some of these Nintendo powers, it is cool to see like some of the big hype. There's still like Super Nintendo games that are getting hype like at the end of its lifespan, like overlapping with N64, which I guess happens with a lot of generations, but just such different styles of games. It was like the leap from SNES to N64 was so huge. So it's like it's always crazy seeing like, okay, like Super Mario RPG came out, then Mario 64 came out, then Donkey Kong Country 3 came out, like all around the same time.
I think SNES had some great games at the end of its lifespan. In some ways, Super Nintendo was like really hitting its stride, while N64, as evidenced by Mortal Kombat Trilogy to a lot of reviewers, was kind of still figuring things out.
Yeah, this was only like I mean, of all the games released so far, this is probably the one that, well, I mean, I guess Pilot Wings isn't like a big deal necessarily, but all the other ones are kind of met pretty favorably, especially obviously Mario 64. So
I find it interesting that you said that this was the first third-party game on the N64, and I wonder how much of that played a factor in how well this was received or its legacy or anything like that. Because who was this developed by?
Well, Midway.
And that's interesting. It's kind of set an interesting precedent too, because historically throughout the Nintendo 64's lifespan, it will be criticized for having poor third-party representation. Its
Yes.
best, its most well-remembered games were the first-party and rare second-party games.
Right.
That's what we were saying in like the in the first episode we talked about. I mentioned that like this was sort of the first like big like breach in like Nintendo's armor a little bit. It was still like I still think like Mario 64 is probably like the best selling game of the time period, I think, but like you had the PlayStation, kind of get a little bit more of, the market than like Sega had, and kind of actually entrench itself in there. And I think this is our first example so far, but we know about how Square and Konami moved a lot of games over to PlayStation because of the hardware. So I don't know, this is kind of a first good example of that. I guess my main familiarity with Mortal Kombat also comes through the movies. So, and McKenna and I did a little mini movie marathon and rewatched them, which was great. And we also covered those over on Virtual Theater. So please go check that out. I guess that's one thing that I've always liked about Mortal Kombat, and it's why I like the movies, even though I like never really got good at the games. Is I just like the world of Mortal Kombat. Like, it's a really goofy like mix of things, but it's very serious at the same time. I don't know. Connor, what do you think about Mortal Kombat compared to like, I don't know, other fighting games in terms of its tone.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's real stupid. If
Yeah.
that's what you mean. It's like the
Yeah.
silliest shit you ever see. They like turn each other into babies.
Yeah,
And do crazy
exactly.
stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that it's stupid, but it's kind of
But yeah, they've got some good deep lore, and like the original co-creator John Tobias, who is still part of the team at this point, definitely did take it very seriously and tried to incorporate like a lot of like not only Chinese mythology, but like little known parts of Chinese culture, like their relationship with ninjas and stuff like that. And then you just have really stupid stuff like big centaur guys who like
yeah, right.
shoot laser beams out of their tails and stuff like that. So
Yeah, like how it's like that, and there's like cyborgs and everything, you know.
yeah, it's just a mishmash of ridiculous stuff. It's cool.
That's actually one thing I really didn't like about that new movie was that everyone got their like ability through like the same like magical thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was really stupid.
They all had like a magical thing, and it's
I really didn't like how they like emphasized that they had like superpowers or something.
Yeah.
That was stupid.
I think it's cooler when you just think like, no, they just gave this guy robot arms, like this guy's got a gun. Like it doesn't, you know, need to like make sense in the lore, you know.
Yeah, you don't need to over explain it.
McKenna, what was your impression of the lore of, or like the world of Mortal Kombat, I guess?
Gosh, it's definitely goofy. It's really interesting how the story is kind of told. It it gives you a little blurb at the beginning, and then you have to go through a sequence of fights and beat them all to get to the end. Their ending and figure that out.
Yeah, and we were reading about like how certain things are canon and certain aren't. Is
Yes,
that true?
I love that you mentioned that because I love that about fighting games. I always think that especially nowadays, like video games don't reach their true potential of the interactive storytelling medium, but fighting games have a really unique approach to storytelling, and it's like, yeah, through those arcade endings, they're able to focus on different characters, and as you alluded to as well, like you don't know what's canon until the next release comes out, which is always kind of fun too.
Oh, they just go like, yeah, these endings are the canon ones. Let's go from there.
Yeah, well, it's like some of them are, some of them aren't, and you don't know. And like the next game, it'll have their backstory might relate to it, and you're like, okay, so that one happened. It's pretty much, unless it's contradicted later, it's canon. But yeah,
gotcha. Okay. Do you have, I guess in terms of, it can be story or just playing or whatever, like, do you have a favorite Mortal Kombat character?
Oh, man. Me?
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to say. I really like, I like Liu Kang. He's a great protagonist. They did a lot of interesting stuff with him.
Yeah.
I like Sub-Zero. It's fun to freeze people. Reptile. I like Rain because he's purple, and his name is Rain, and he's a prince. So that's good stuff.
That's pretty good.
I mean, what about you guys? Who really spoke to you?
McKenna, you had a character you kept going to, right?
Yeah, I went to Sindel a lot. I played a lot as her, and she's got like a hair,
like
hair whipping move that she does. That's cool. I pulled it off a few times. I played as Jade a couple times too. I thought she was cool.
She's got a big pole.
Yeah. All their different features make for fun, unique moves and fatalities and so on.
Yeah, did you have a favorite? You watched like a compilation of fatalities?
Okay, yeah, I did. There's like an hour-long compilation that shows all the fatalities, the brutalities, the animalities, and the friendships and the babalities.
Babalities.
There's so many. I liked all the ones where you were just seeing body parts being ripped apart from each other, like someone's skin got ripped off, completely ripped off, so you just got their skeleton left. It's
Cool.
It's
I think my favorite is probably Kano's, and he just pulls the person's skeleton right out of their mouth. 'Cause it's just so stupid. Their skin just falls loose to the floor. But besides that, I don't much care for the violence myself.
Oh, okay.
Oh, maybe we
That's
should
a hot take.
go into the controversy.
All the legal stuff or whatever with the violence in video games. I think that was more a bigger deal for Mortal Kombat 2, right? Like,
that predated this particular release by a little bit. I mean, I'm sure like that stank still lingered on the brand, but I think at this point parents were more concerned about like South Park.
South Park drew the attention away from Mortal Kombat.
Oh, thank goodness. Well, we're gonna get some South Park games in too, so
that's good. I think as a final note too, it's worth noting that this game is all Chicago made. All the actors are from around the area, developers. This is probably one of the most well-known Chicago developed game series.
One of my favorite things about playing certain Midway games, like if you go to some of the arcades around here and they got the Midway games, some of them will be like, write to us, and it's got their address on I forgot which street they're on, Irving Park maybe, I don't remember, but it's like got the address and everything, and I'm like, hell yeah. Like, I don't think they're not there anymore, but
I believe that NetherRealm Studios, the current like developers of the game, still operate in Chicago to some capacity, but yeah, I'm sure they're not in the same building.
Yeah, I believe I saw like a sign for like their studios once, like a parking sign or something. That's once. Cool. It's like, oh, wow. Yeah, true. Shout out to Chicago. I wanted to say in terms of my favorite characters, a lot of them have, and fatalities, I guess, they've all been from like specific things. Like, I really liked Liu Kang because of the original movies, but then I think I realized that I just liked Robin Cho, I think is his name, who plays
he's
him.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I was playing the games, I'm like, I don't really like playing as Liu Kang as much, but I just think in those movies he's so cool.
I agree.
Yeah.
He elevated the character for sure.
But I like playing as Raiden and like, kind of all the like the obvious ones like Sub-Zero and Scorpion, like the obvious characters, but they're the coolest. I can't help it. My favorite fatality though, and it also comes from the movie, or it doesn't come from the movie, but it's because of the movie I especially like it, is the one where Scorpion reveals his skull and breathes fire or whatever.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's just, yeah, that's perfectly dumb and suiting for Mortal Kombat. So yeah, overall, it was fun and interesting to play, this version of this game on N64. But let's talk about our other game. McKenna, why don't you tell us about Wave Race 64?
Wave Race 64 is a jet ski racing game featuring 4 characters with their own watercrafts with different strengths and weaknesses. You'll race through various courses such as Sunset Bay and Drake Lake while navigating around buoys, or perform tricks and pass through rings in stunt mode. Compete in a series of courses to win the championship, try to get your best time in time trials, or play against friends in multiplayer.
So Wave Race. Connor, you've played this a few times, right? Like this, I know we played a little bit together, but you've tried it out before, right?
Yeah, I definitely played this game. I think it was like a multiplayer standard, and there's a lot I like about it, especially the aesthetics of the game. I like a lot of the design, but I'm really bad at it.
Like how bad are we talking? Like, you can,
I mean, I could finish a race.
Yeah, okay.
I end up getting turned around a lot, and look, it's just I struggle. But I definitely understand why this was a choice as a
Nintendo 64 launch title, especially, you know, they really want to show off the sweet water physics, right?
Yes, and
Oh yeah.
we actually watched, there's a great video, everyone should go check out a video by a channel called Modern Vintage Gamer, and they talk about the like actual tech behind the waves, and it's super cool. It's like he shows like basically it's like this wave net that are made out of just like triangles that are all connected, and they, you know, they put the art in on top of it. But then on top of that, they have, I guess, to like simulate, you know, waves. They couldn't do a simulation that would just be like waves created like from your jet ski that mixes with the water. So the thing they did instead is each level they programmed like the wave intensity and like directions to like come from different ways, and it changes like depending on where you are at in the course. And so it makes it feel a little bit more, I guess, dynamic for the time. You know, it's pretty primitive now, I guess, by modern standards, but like at the time it's like a very like impressive like workaround to create something that feels a little bit more natural, I guess.
Yeah, the waves are wild. They're insane.
I love how
they turn you around very often. And I was doing a little bit of research before this, and it also like for an N64 game, the waves actually don't look too bad either. And it says that it uses the N64's alpha blending feature, which makes the water simultaneously transparent and reflective. So they're showing Nintendo loves to show off when they can make water look cool.
Yeah, this is one of their big ones. Yeah, just the visual and everything. Like, also some of the different levels have different like lighting. It's different times of day, and like some of them. One of my favorite levels is the Drake Lake one, where it's like this serene lake with like ducks and fog, and like the waves there aren't as you know, it's not as big because it's just a little lake, you know, so it's kind of gentle. It's like
starts off foggy, and then by the third lap it clears up.
Oh yeah,
that's
love that.
Really cool.
Compared to like another level where it's like the waves are nasty. You know what I mean? Like, I love that variation.
Those ducks are so good.
They're beautiful. I'd love that's a perfect like low poly animal. You know, I want to get the
low poly animal.
I want to see that model up close. If it is even a model, it's probably just like a sprite. McKenna, what about you? We played together on our N64. How was that?
That was pretty fun. I think I started. I didn't realize at first that the different vehicles had like different abilities with like their speed, acceleration, and handling. I think the one I chose first was not very good with like it just turned way too hard, and I remember switching to a different vehicle, and I didn't notice because I didn't know that they had different abilities, but I got one and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm good at this now.
Yeah, some people have better balance.
Later, I switched back to another one and I was like, wait, am I bad at this again? And then I realized like, oh, okay, they handle differently.
That's something that I also couldn't fully wrap my head around, because on top of that, there's also modes to do like the normal stats for the jet skis, and then you can like customize and change it.
Yes.
When you select them.
It's actually pretty cool. I feel like the level of customization that you could do. But yeah, it doesn't like tell you, like it doesn't show you their stats. But we had the fortune, we were looking at the Nintendo Power from the time, and it like broke down what everyone was better at. And then it was even suggesting from there, you know, like customizing the jet ski. So I could see like there's probably like builds that people have of their specific, you know, good loadouts for.
It's just like with like Mario Kart speedrunners, there's like optimal characters to pick with specific carts, and like.
Wow.
I just picked the person who like has the coolest like color option, and then hope they're better.
Yep.
What about also we talked about the aesthetic, but what about the soundtrack is top
man.
tier for this game.
It's ridiculous.
It's got a lot of great.
That was actually this game I wasn't familiar with when I was a kid, or I think I had heard of it, and I had heard of the Wave Race games before, but I had never played any of them until recently when Wave Race 64 came to Nintendo Switch Online. But my first real exposure to the game was Goo at one of the marathons. You were showing me the soundtrack, and like
yeah, it's always been
playing
big
a
for
few
me.
songs. I felt like I was intimately familiar with the game already because it has that like fantastic, optimistic, memorable guitar riffs and like feels very summery, very exciting.
Yeah, like posy guitar solos.
Yeah. No, it absolutely rips. And I was curious because we also give a lot of credit to games like the Zelda CDI games. We give credit to Tony Trippy for just going way harder than he needed to. So I was curious who did the soundtrack for this game.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh
of
my
course
goodness.
I did look this up.
It's Totaka, Kazumi Totaka. And I was like, okay, that makes complete sense. Because
what are some of his other works?
he's well known for, he worked on a couple of Yoshi games, a couple of Mario games, but the big ones are, he worked on all of the Luigi's Mansion games and all of the Animal Crossing games.
Mario
Paint. Mario Paint.
Mario
too,
Paint, yeah.
He also worked on Link's Awakening too.
Yes. Yeah.
Wii
He's
Sports.
also-
That's
Yeah.
the best one. Wii Sports.
Oh
right
my
there.
goodness.
Oh,
A similar
Wii Sports has incredible
vibe
music.
to this. A little less extreme, but
He's
Yeah, he
also
knows-
the voice of Yoshi.
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
yeah,
That dude knows how to create just a
riff or a melody that just gets implanted into your brain and never leaves.
Definitely.
we were
I
watching
still some of that early Animal Crossing.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were watching just before we were recording like different like covers of the songs or whatever, and like some of the melodies are just so like memorable for me, so good that like I was like any cover I was into basically. And they're all good, but I had like I would have loved anything probably.
Well, it's really impressive too because like I was just today I decided to listen to those videos where it's like the entire soundtrack just in one video, one
Yes.
after another. I listened to one of those today, and there's so much use of like the main theme that you hear when the game starts up. Different chunks of that theme are sprinkled throughout so many different themes throughout the rest of the game.
Yes.
With like different instrumentation or like a different tone, and they use like motifs in an awesome way.
Yeah.
To the point where like
Just a random one that was like 25 minutes in, it was like fourth prize.
and it was basically just a remix of the main theme.
Yes.
But it sounded like a Janet Jackson song or something. I was like, what am I listening to? This is so good.
There were like I think different songs for every place you get, which I thought was crazy. I thought that was crazy they did that.
Not just for like the when you actually like win
and get to the ceremony, but there's also like, if you finish a race, just the results screen is different depending on which place you came in.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Do you guys know if any of the songs happen to feature pan flute? I feel like that was a real staple of Nintendo 64 MIDI pan flute.
Wasn't there one we were saying like this sounds like a Spirit Tracks song?
Yes. Yeah.
Did it have pan flute?
Definitely some.
Probably.
Yeah, I think it
Like
did.
the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think there was one with pan flute and and it had a rhythm like chicka 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 that I thought like it was like Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks.
I always thought this game was a landmark title for another reason, and that's because, of its place in the pantheon of in-game advertising.
Kawasaki or whatever.
Oh.
That's how I decided who I was going to pick in that game. Who had the sickest real-life bike or game
Oh,
race.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good one. Yeah, I didn't have that with this, but that's how in some of the like NASCAR games I would play, I would just be like, oh, this guy's got the fucking, you know, whatever car, I'm gonna pick that one. With the music, I have a very specific history, like memory of it, which was like, I loved the game obviously like back in the day, and then I remember, I don't know which N64 I was on at this point, but one of the first places I ever moved to on my own, I had a bunch of roommates in Chicago, and we would, you know, play like games sometimes together, and I just have a very fond memory of being like, guys, this game has an amazing soundtrack, like we got to listen to it. And we put it in, and you can go to the options and go to the sound test mode and just like listen to the songs, and we were just like going through and just jamming out to all the songs, getting stoked. It was great. And then shortly after that, I got a job doing bike delivery at a sandwich shop, and I would have like a you know, play some music while I'd bike around, and I would often play the Wave Race 64 soundtrack as I biked around and got amped up.
Fitting.
It's a great soundtrack to deliver to.
Yeah, it's very, very fond memories of this game. Similarly, like I never got very good at it, but you know, I could beat the normal circuit. You know, we unlocked the hard mode, but the hard mode I always kind of struggled with. But that was another thing we were reading in Nintendo Power. They had, like, it basically had like a walkthrough for every level.
Oh,
it
yeah.
told you basically like the specific thing you would have to do in each level to like actually win the game. You know, like the certain things that could trip you up. Like each level, it would basically like say like, look out for this and don't fuck this up or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. So I guess if I studied that a little more, maybe I could beat the hard mode.
So the past week or so, the past few days, I've been playing it on Nintendo Switch Online, trying to see how far I could get. I beat the normal mode. I ended up beating the hard mode, and Expert was the one that tripped me up. And it's just interesting to see how this game works as like a racing game, because the games that a lot of people are familiar with are games like Mario Kart, which is pretty much a party game to an extent, where it's like, you know, the tracks aren't too insane, especially in the early ones, and you have items and it's everyone's going around, and this is very precise. There's a lot of stuff that you need to act against. Like you have the waves, which are seemingly random, and like you said, on some courses like the Marine Fortress or whatever, and the port one, the waves are crazy on that, and there's a lot of really tight turns. And something that I think is a really interesting way of like adding difficulty, especially when you up the levels, is the buoys that you have to go around either on the right or left side. And the fact that it's not like you can just ignore those, because if you miss a certain amount, then you're booted out of the race and you lose. So that just makes it, you know, this already controls pretty difficult, and that's an additional hurdle to get over. And that's something I noticed, is the placement of those gets more difficult as the difficulty level goes up.
I know in some of them too, they like close off certain things, or like there's other ways you gotta go.
One of the things we noticed is that you can change the number of like buoys that you can miss. I don't think you can make it easier than the standard like 5.
No, you can make it harder.
You can make it harder, that you can't miss any of them, or you know, I think you can do up to, you know, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and like you can also change the level of waves, I guess, how rough the waves are. I think was there one more? I think there was another difficulty setting, but
yeah, those are like,
I was kind of impressed about the difficulty settings.
I would imagine that this is like a fun game to play multiplayer too, which that's something that
It
games
was,
like
yeah.
Mario Kart are very well known for, is that they're very multiplayer friendly. Anyone can pick it up and play, but this is like, even if you're playing by yourself, like those different aspects of it, the challenges that they bring to it, make it like I was on the edge of my seat just playing by myself, and the races only have 3 other
Yeah.
contestants, you know?
I was often what I would say is in the zone, you know, where I'm just like,
Yeah.
I was so enraptured in some of the races, like so focused, you know?
I mean, I'm also I've been a huge Mario Kart fan for my whole life, and I've like spent a lot of time trying to get good at a few of the Mario Kart games, and it like in those games it feels similar to like when you pull off a perfectly well timed like drift boost around a really tight corner and do a bunch in succession, but it feels like you're doing that all the time because you have to. Some of the buoys are placed where it's like you got to go right, then left, then right, then left, then a tight corner, and then right, then left, and
And
like
that
Connor was
also
saying
like readjusting
before, like-
yourself from waves and stuff. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I was just what Connor said before. Like a lot of times it just gets to a point where there are too many things going on at once, and like a turn is too tight, and a wave ends up like spinning you completely around, and you have to fully readjust where you're facing, and it's a pretty difficult game.
yeah, it definitely gets tricky. And you mentioned the multiplayer. I wanted to say, and also tying back to the first episode, we mentioned the kind of the flip side of like the, one of the console's kind of weaknesses was, losing some of those third-party developers. And we saw that we kind of see that already with Mortal Kombat being kind of one of the weaker entries, I guess, or like not quite living up to it or whatever. But then on the flip side, one thing the console ends up being really good at is the multiplayer. And this is one of the big ones, even though it's only like I think more fondly of a lot of the 4-player multiplayer games. This only has 2-player, but it's still a lot of fun. And so I don't know. I think it's interesting here, and this is really the first multiplayer game we've gotten so far. Like the other ones were fun to play
that
together.
was the big selling point for the Nintendo 64, right? Is the multiplayer. I think it was the first console that had 4 controllers at once. I mean, other consoles had it as a feature, but you had to get add-ons or whatever.
Yeah, you had to like.
Yep.
I did some of that with like NES back in the day, but it was always weird. Yeah, you had to add like adapters and stuff. This is just like, plug them right in the front. This was definitely the heyday for that. It's cool. We got it right here in this episode.
That's kind of why I find it interesting, like what its legacy was or its placement in terms of like other racing games of the era, because I don't really know that much of what came before it. I know F-Zero came before it. F-Zero was on the SNES.
This actually, the development of this game, so it started, the vehicles in the game looked like F-Zero vehicles. We were looking at footage of it. It was really weird.
That's actually what I was just gonna say. In the research, I was saying they were referring to it as F-Zero in water, and originally it was gonna use like high-speed boats, but I guess Miyamoto thought that it would feel too similar to something like that. So he wanted to do something different. So there was F-Zero, and then of course there was Mario Kart, the original, on the SNES. And I don't know how many, I'm sure there were plenty of other ones, but just seeing the placement of this game in the timeline of racing games specifically, it's interesting that we have this game, which is seems to be pretty new, because it's a 3D racing game with multiplayer, and it's pretty difficult compared to a game like Mortal Kombat, which also has a pretty high bar of entry, but seems like that series and games like that are kind of panned for that, whereas I think this was pretty well received, right?
For multiplayer? Well, I mean, Mortal Kombat was, in terms of like the barrier to entry, I don't think was as, I don't know if that it really had a stigma around it because you could just kind of go and play at the arcade. I think that's what people did a lot.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I guess I wasn't really playing games in the arcade at this time, though. But in terms of like the span of racing games, though, like you also have like the more around this time we get some games that are like the more serious like racing, sim games. I think
this game did predate Gran Turismo by about a year, so
yeah. So I think that's you're gonna see more of those on PlayStation. I think too, a lot more of those games. Most of the racing games on N64, and it kind of fits their whole mold a little bit more, but they're more like the arcade or party style games,
Yeah, pretty unique, and a subgenre that kind of is eventually gonna lean a lot more towards either like high-speed cars or like lower-speed kart racing with like fun items and stuff. Like this Wave Race 64 definitely stands on its own.
Yeah. This made me want to check out the... Sorry, Connor, go ahead.
I think Cruising USA is gonna drop not too long from this point.
That's I think not the next episode, but the one after that, and that's also a big one. That's gonna be sweet. This made me want to go, and I haven't tried it yet, but I want to play the Game Boy Wave Race game that came before this, which also featured jet skis. I guess that's kind of why they were like, hey, this fits more in line with the first one. But I don't know, it makes me want to check it out. I've never really heard anything about it. Did anyone... Oh, one last thing. Did anyone do any of the stunt mode? That was pretty tough. So I feel like I didn't get into it that much.
I did it once, and I went through the rings, and and I finished it, and then it was like stunt points 0, and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, so...
There's like a mode you can go in, and like they'll tell you how to do like the barrel roll and all these different tricks, but I don't know, it didn't appeal to me.
Sorry, I think I actually ended up doing stuff like that in races by accident. Like I think I actually did like a barrel roll type thing in midair in a race, and I was like, I don't know how I didn't fall off, but that's pretty cool.
The moves are cool. I don't know. Those are more like also like combos where I'm like my brain doesn't want to think that third dimensionally, I guess.
Yeah.
But there is I did go and look, and I remembered this. I don't think I ever did this. Someone I must have known did this, but in one of the stunt tracks, if you do everything like perfect, basically you can ride the dolphin at Dolphin Park.
That's rad.
Yeah.
We gotta get good at this.
Yeah.
Unlock
Yeah.
the dolphin.
This is a game I can see us going back to also. Like I enjoyed it a lot, so I feel like now that we have our whole N64 set up, we should be doing, some more so we shouldn't just pass on all the games,
Right. We should don't leave them behind.
Well, yeah, that was fun going back, talking about Wave Race, listen to the soundtrack. Our next games are going to be, these two actually they released a week apart, but we're gonna throw them together. We got Wayne Gretzky 3D Hockey, which we've played a little bit, so we gotta get back to it, and Killer Instinct Gold, which well, actually, that's another fighting game. I don't know, Connor, any feelings about that game?
Yeah, very similar to Mortal Kombat in a lot of ways too, in terms of the design and the like the way they did their graphics and whatnot. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Rareware.
Oh yeah,
big fan. Yeah, is that your first Rare game that you're gonna have?
Yes. Yeah,
that's something.
I won't hold you to it, but maybe we could get you to come back and
that could be fun.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us, Connor. Do you wanna promote anything or put anything out there?
Well, you can go ahead and come see me dabble in some video games on twitch.tv/Connor Tonight, or follow me on Twitter at Connor Tonight. That's about it for me.
Nice. What do you been streaming lately?
Mortal Kombat, actually.
Nice. Was it inspired by this?
Well, yeah, we were playing, so I was like, yeah, gotta brush up on my MK.
Nice.
Corey, what about you? Anything you want to plug, get out into the world?
I don't know, man. So anything you can listen to me, and you can probably listen to Gooin too. Go check out Gooey's Dungeon Dive.
Oh yeah.
And go check out Zelda Dungeon. Check out the Zelda Dungeon YouTube channel. I guess you can. I have a podcast, but it's been on hiatus for like forever, so I guess I won't plug that.
Don't even say it.
You can follow me on Twitter at Corey Richmond. You know what? Why don't you go follow me on YouTube? Because the last video I released was I do some seasonal or themed like music compilations, and the last one I did was for summer, and that compilation starts with the Wave Race 64 main theme.
Oh, nice.
Oh, well, McKenna, how about you? Anything you want to throw out there?
You can follow me on YouTube or subscribe to me on YouTube at Harvest Gamer McLiz. I actually played this week some Super Dungeon Maker, which is like basically a Zelda Dungeon Maker, and I have a video where I go through a replica of Inside the Great Deku Tree, which will be is a dungeon we'll be talking about a little down the line on here.
Yeah, set the table.
Yeah, and you can follow me on Twitter at McKenna Games.
All right. Well, yeah, Corey, you said all the things I would say. You can go back and hear us talk about N64 games on Gooey's Dungeon Dive. You can hear us talk about Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. We just finished up the Wind Waker. Awesome game. And yeah, over at Zelda, I mean, we're like out. Well, actually, like Tears of the Kingdom is like kind of out right now too, if you live in certain parts of the world, or you got it some other ways. But yeah, we're gonna be probably talking a lot about that over at Zelda Dungeon, so be on the lookout for that.
Tears content for sure.
And Corey, thanks for making all the like artwork and stuff that we use for the show.
Absolutely.
That was done by yours truly, or his truly.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, Corey did the artwork. Nico did our awesome theme that we've been jamming out to. Again, please rate and review. Get the numbers up. Like, subscribe, comment. It's also on YouTube. We're on Twitter at Flashback64Pod. If you want to email us, I guess you could email us at flashback64pod@gmail.com. And we also got a little Discord. That's actually it's been cool. It's kind of got people from not just I was expecting some of the Zelda Dungeon crowd to come by, but we've got quite a few different people in there, and it's been fun sharing things like the Macarena at the 1996 Democratic Nashville Convention. Some people have been sharing other someone had an Australian gaming magazine from the time and was posting like the reviews for each game that's been covered, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, there's just cool discussion in there. So yeah, thanks
what about
to
the PO box?
We actually did that at Zelda Dungeon, but I think that form of communication has just fallen out of favor too much.
It's fitting. It's befitting of a Nintendo 64 podcast, though, I feel like.
That's true. Okay, we'll do it only if when you look at the Nintendo Power, people send in, and on the envelope they would do those badass drawings. They like color on the whole envelope.
Definitely the envelope art, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of what's popular at the time is Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger. So that's the type of artwork we're gonna need to see. So yeah, thanks to everyone for listening, and Corey, Connor, thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah,
Thanks for letting me on.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Flashback 64 wins. Friendship.